Welcome to Android Dialogues, where we have bite-sized conversations with people in the Android community. I'm Huyen and I'm speaking with
Jonathan Maltz.
And we're currently in Chicago for Chicago Roboto, where both of us were speaking, and I had the absolute pleasure of seeing Jonathan's talk this morning. Jonathan, where are you based, and how did you get started in Android?
So I'm based out of San Francisco. I work at Yelp, specifically on our Yelp Eat24 product.
Which I actually use that, though, very much. I order in a lot, but sorry. Okay, please go ahead.
So that makes two of us. So I got started in Android development because I interned with Yelp back in the summer of 2013. And I was like, I know Java. And they were like, cool, we need Android developers. And I was like, great, I guess I'm on your Android team. And ever since then, it's been sort of now I do full stack work, but there was a long time where I was exclusively doing Android client development, both on our consumer app and our Eat24 mobile application.
So what Jonathan's talk was on today is a subject that I actually am fascinated by, and I think it's something that we don't address as much as we should or we could, and that is mentorship. Jonathan, why is mentorship important?
So I think there's two pieces about why mentorship is important. First is something that, from a personal perspective, it's really important for me, is that I always think about the opportunity to mentor as becoming someone's spirit animal. And so I'm sure all of us who have worked with a really great mentor in the past, we sort of have that person that we're if I'm trying to figure out what to do, what would Carmen do? That's always the question I ask myself, because Carmen was a mentor that I had. And it just sort of guides all of my decision-making process. And that's an incredibly powerful thing to give to another human being, is give them that sort of mental model for how to operate through things.
Right.
The flip side of that is, I outlined a little bit of this in my talk, but I think really the biggest thing about why mentorship is important is because it allows you to really affect any change that you want to see in your team. In that, if you're thinking about sort of any change that you want to make, whether it's you want your app to be more accessible or you want to get higher test coverage, you can talk to everyone on your team and say this is really important and build consensus around it. And then once you do that, you still need to then go around and write the lint checks to make sure that people write their accessible code. Mm-hmm. That was another thing we heard about today.
From Mallika,
yeah.
who we also interviewed for this channel.
Yeah. So the flip side of that is, if you have someone that's just coming on board your team, you're well, one of the things we really care about here is we really care about accessibility. Mm-hmm. And so we need to make sure that all of our code is accessible. And so from day one, that person's going to come in and they're going to be oh yeah, I'm writing a new image view. Accessibility is really important. Let me make sure that it has a content description. And I'm writing a custom view. Let me make sure that it has the accessibility view node providers. I forget what that API is called.
I do too, but yeah, no.
Yeah, the thing that you use that lets your stuff be accessible. And it just sort of organically happens. And that is significantly easier than having to sort of break all the old habits that your team might have just because of historical context.
Yeah, and that happens. We all have baggage, either from previous experiences, previous features or previous projects, and it's kind of nice to bring in someone with a clean slate. I was gonna say indoctrination, but that's a little bit strong. But again, yeah, kind of bringing everyone up to kind of this an even playing field, and doing it kind of with a fresh mind. I don't think anyone would ever disagree that mentorship is a good thing. But I think that a lot of people maybe that are maybe not kind of running mentorship programs at work might have some reasons or just kind of concerns we don't have time and how do we go about this? And you actually answer some of those questions. So can you answer well, how do I know if I have enough time for mentorship, and how do I even get started?
So to the first point about having enough time, I think that saying we're not going to really put an active mentorship program in place for anyone that comes on board is you're basically taking a gamble. And that gamble is saying that this new person that we bring on board is going to naturally be able to easily integrate with our team and all of our communication styles, and they'll figure out all the cultural things that need to happen, and they'll also be able to figure out how to contribute code in the absence of anyone telling them where the code actually lives.
Right.
And there are people like that exist in the world. Chances are they make exorbitant amounts of money, and you probably cannot hire all of them to work on your team. There are significantly more people, though, that sort of can come in and will be able to do all those things, but they're going to need some light guide rails. You're going to need to tell them, oh, hey, this diff that you submitted on your code review is really big, and we try not to have big diffs here because it lets us ship code faster when we have smaller diffs. Mm-hmm. And that person might be used to shipping large diffs because they come from a waterfall shop or something like that.
Right.
And they just need to sort of change their mindset around how code review works. And if you're willing to invest that time, First off, the number of people who come in and are not successful on your team goes down dramatically because you're making that investment in them. And then also you'll find that over time your team is just much more successful because you've intentionally created this team culture and this team dynamic that you want to have happen. On the flip side, the other question you asked about was sort of how do you get started with mentorship? And I talk about this a little bit in the presentation. My friend did this for a bunch of the interns that he mentored, and it was like mind-blowingly simple when I found out about it, which is like before all of his interns came in, he like sat down and he like wrote a list, and he was like, this is everything that my interns will know by the end of their internship. And then so really we, on the Android team, we took that idea and said, this is what we believe that every full-time Android engineer at Yelp should know by the time they are at some point in their career here. And so what I try to do when I'm mentoring someone is say like basically just work through that list and make sure like, do they know the activity lifecycle? Do they know the fragment lifecycle? But it also includes a bunch of other stuff. Like it includes non-technical and sort of cultural things. So like we try to give all of our developers an introduction to visual design because we want our developers and our designers to be teammates together, as opposed to like just being like, oh, there's the design team, they know how design works, let's pitch something over the fence. So by virtue of teaching that as part of the ramp-up process, they're able to go back and forth with a designer and make trade-offs, as opposed to it being like this push and pull type of situation.
So I think on the flip side of it, and I think maybe putting myself in the position where if someone asked me to be a mentor, I think that, I would want to, because I do feel like, well, I have things to share and I want to help someone out, but it seems daunting for a few reasons. Number one, I'm an engineer. I'm a little stereotypical in that sometimes, the idea of like, maybe I'm a little scared of my people skills. Maybe I'm a little bit shy. And the other side is just like, how do I not, screw up? What can I do to be a good mentor? And it's something that maybe we don't always get as instruction or as experience at work. Do you have any tips on how to be a good mentor, or even how to start?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is I think a lot of times we think about mentoring as like this thing that you have or you don't have, and like actually it's a skill. And like there's a reason that we don't just say, hey, Maltz, mentor every new hire that comes onto our team, because like much like you have an engineering bus factor, that makes a mentoring bus factor on our team. And so like there have been times where we're like, well, maybe this person doesn't have every single skill that we need for them to mentor this new hire, but they're going to learn those skills as part of this process. And so just like we think about working effectively with legacy code and we read the Michael Feathers book about how to do that, we need to think about mentorship as a skill and a skill that we learn just like we do anything else. In terms of how to get started with mentoring, I think there's a couple big things. The first is like, be really, really willing to be there for your mentee. That's sort of like getting your heart in the right place. And if you do that, I think there's a lot of things that come out of it. And that there's gonna be times when like I've never raised a child, but like my friends and family who have raised a child have told me that like there are times when children are really hard, and you just like want to be like, oh, just shut up and do what I tell you to. But you need to be patient and you need to sort of give them the opportunity to learn those lessons. And that's, I think, the first thing is like getting your headspace right, that you're going to be someone who is going to like not just like throw knowledge over the fence to your mentee, but really be there as like a partner for them and helping them learn and helping them grow. And I think once you do that, I think the biggest thing that sort of helps me to be successful as a mentor is first off, early on, like starting with a really high standard for the product that my mentee produces. So a lot of times this means like the first couple of code reviews are like huge teaching opportunities, even though they're like 1 or 2 lines of code. It's like, oh, your braces are in the wrong place. Here's a style guide for that. Like the architecture that you used isn't quite the architecture that we're trying to use because this isn't exactly very unit testable. And so like really being willing to provide all those resources and continue to keep that high bar, even if your mentee's sort of struggling to meet it in the beginning.
But I mean, like, how do you keep, I mean, like, obviously that's super important, but is there any kind of like, do you have a secret to like keeping people from being, I guess, discouraged though? Because sometimes it's intimidating, like maybe your first PR at a new company. Generally it's like, there's like 50 comments on this PR, but it's not necessarily that you're a bad engineer. It's just that, we do things a certain way. Everyone has their own style or conventions or architecture. How can you maintain the high level of quality, but also kind of encourage them at the same time? Because that's the kind of the intimidating thing to me. And I think sometimes I worry about being too mean or worrying about upsetting someone. But at the same time, there's you have a responsibility to create quality product. How do you balance the two?
Yeah, so there's two things there. One is a great quote that I heard from Michael Lopp. And he had this quote that he said that he actually learned from someone he played video games with online. And it was this concept of being unfailingly kind. And what it meant was like basically everything that you do, like you don't need to be nice. So nice is like sugarcoating things and not telling people what they need to know. Being kind is taking the knowledge that this person needs to hear and being as like understanding and as empathetic as possible and acknowledging the fact that like if you're giving code review feedback, this is going to affect their feelings. So you need to give it in as kind and a collaborative way as possible. But more than that, I think the tactical thing that comes out of that is really celebrating the fact when people are successful. So if you think about those first couple of PRs when you're giving 50 comments on a 5-line change because there are tons of little things that need to happen, that's going to go away, and you should make sure to like call out the fact that, hey, mentee, you've made like look at this pull request that you put out last week, and look at this pull request that you have now, and look at how much like this one sailed right through code review. It has great test coverage. The architecture is on point, and so just like being mindful of calling out those successes as soon as they happen and as frequently as possible, so that this is going to come back to that sort of a little bit of indoctrination thing, but sort of you're reinforcing the behaviors that you want to see, because if people know that like they're going to be celebrated when they do these particular behaviors, they're going to continue to do that, as opposed to like, and in the absence of that, they're just going to like not do the stuff that doesn't have them be celebrated. So.
Awesome. It's simple, but it's also like straightforward. I think. Well, thank you very much. Well, I don't want to get into too much because we really want you to see Jonathan's talk, which was really fantastic. So we'll have a really nice link in the show notes somewhere down there for you to click and enjoy. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
If people wanted to find you on the internet, how can they do that?
I am on the Twitterverse as @MaltzJ. Also, if you are in any Slack channels that I might also happen to be in, I am also @MaltzJ there. So if you're like, I wonder if this Maltz guy's hanging around, @MaltzJ, and like maybe my face will pop up.
Awesome. Well, definitely, again, if you are interested in either being a mentor or being mentored or starting a mentorship program at your office, or just want to kind of talk to Jonathan about how he does things, please do that. And thank you so much, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure. And thank y'all. And we'll see you next time. Bye. This is just take 2. It's no big deal. Just 2. That is being recorded, which is awesome. Okay, let's give it another shot.